Here he is, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody out there, we gonna get bad with ourselves. Barry Richards.
Let's give him the clap. And we're ready.
I got to go to the free clinic. He gave me the clap. He clapped the thing here. Come on in. I'm BR. This is the first podcast and maybe the last podcast. I don't know. We're going to see what the dealio is. We're going to start off 60 years ago when I first got interested in radio. I'm from Washington, D.C. I grew up in the hood, southeast is what they say now, and northeast. I lived in Anacostia. Then I moved to Northwest D.C., and then I moved to Silver Spring, and then I moved to Potomac, Maryland, and then I moved to New Orleans. And from there, I went all around the country, running radio stations, working at radio stations, and owning radio stations. And now I consult with record labels on what they should release to pop and rhythm stations. But getting started, it's 1961, and I'm 15 years old back then. Now you know how old I am. I mean, I'm older than dirt. But back then, they had a no hitchhiking law. And I was going to see this girl, Betty Tompkins, who lived in Wheaton, Maryland, and I lived in D.C. at the time. And I'm hitchhiking, and I'd been busted for hitchhiking a couple of times. They wouldn't lock you up. They would take you to the police station, and because I'm young, they'd have to get your mother to come get me. By this time, my father had passed, and my mother came from Lutz, Poland. She spoke a very broken English, and she was very Orthodox Jewish. She also didn't drive a car. So there was a big hassle. She had to take a bus to come get me. So I didn't want to get popped again. So I'm at George Avenue and University Boulevard, and I'm running down the street, and the cops are chasing me, and there's a door open, and it says WDON. I didn't even know what the hell it was. I ran in there, and on the radio was Don Dillard. And I said, Don, I didn't even know the man's name. He said, what do you want? I said, the Popo. Well, they didn't call it the Popo then. The police was chasing me. So he had these big, wide turntables. They used to play transcriptions. He put me under the turntable. The cop came in and said, did you see a kid run in here? And he said, no. So from then on, I had the bug. I became his flunky. They paid me $1 an hour. I used to wipe up the studio, and he had a contest, which was today that wouldn't work, but he had a screen door, and what he would do, he would put a 45, like the new Elvis record or the new Beatles record, before you could buy it, and the first person up there could get the record. So meanwhile, people are having accidents, making U-turns to get a 98-cent record, but it's before it was released. I would do that, and then I would take dedications on the telephone, and it got to the point where he couldn't read my writing. So he let me on the radio to read the dedications. Then, bang, I'm a star. I mean, in school, hey, Don Dillard at that time was the biggest disc jockey in Washington, D.C. Like, every city had a major guy. Dick Clark was Philly, Alan Freed was New York, in Baltimore was Buddy Dean, and in D.C. there were two guys. Milt Grant was on TV, and Don Dillard was the radio guy. And his parents owned the station. It was named after him, and the station was kind of Mickey Mouse because it was an AM daytimer, 250 watts. You could get a toaster or a light bulb that had more power. But he was the only guy. He influenced my taste in music. He played R&B. He played the real records. Like Little Richard had Tutti Frutti and Long Tall Sally. The pop stations would play Pat Boone's version. He played the black guys' versions. He played Fats Domino mixed up with Elvis, mixed up with the Beatles. And he was the biggest thing since sliced bread in Washington, D.C. And he had a work ethic that I don't know anybody that's ever done that. When the station would sign on, when the sun went up, he would go on in the morning till 9. Then he'd go off, whatever he would do, and then come back at 3 until they signed off. And on Saturday, he was on from 12 noon to sign off. And in the summertime, it would be 8:30 at night. But lucky for me, he got tired because eventually I got on 6 to 8:30. But in the beginning, I had marbles in my mouth. I couldn't talk. I really sounded bad. I mean, I don't know why he let me on. And he would do record hops on the weekend, like at the Silver Spring Armory, the Hyattsville Armory, the Bladensburg Fire Hall. The big line there was bring your own hose. You figured that out. The Silver Spring Boys Club. And he would have people like Link Wray and the Raymen. Link Wray lived in D.C., and of course he had that monster record at that time, Rumble. So he would do hops, and I would carry his records, and I would play the records while he announced them. And he gave me $50. That bang! I mean, I'm pumped up. That's stupid money to me back then. I'm a kid, and like I said, I came from very meager upbringings. My parents escaped Hitler. They had to learn to speak English, and they had to learn how to write English. And, you know, they had their certificate that they were citizens on the walls. And my father died when I was 8. They thought he had tuberculosis. It was lung cancer. He used to smoke 2 packs a day of Lucky Strike. And he had a meager job. He was a paper hanger and painter. And my mother, because she spoke very broken English, used to candle eggs. I never even knew what the hell that was. She would look at an egg, and if it had a bloodshot in it, it would go in one pile. And if it was a regular egg, she'd put it in the other pile. I mean, she was an egg candler.
It kind of reminds me, for those of you who are listening in, my name's Solly. I am Barry's IT guy. And we met a couple of years back through a mutual contact.
Well, through my son.
Was it through Paul?
Was it Paul or was it Destructo?
I thought it was through Nick.
Nick who?
Nick, who used to kind of work with you? Nick Regali? No?
No.
I guess it was through Paul then.
It was through Paul.
Cool.
No, he's the best IT guy in L.A. He does podcasts for John Legend. And, if you lived in L.A., the guy from used to be at K-Rock, who's at KLOS.
Uh-huh. Kevin Ryder, and he does a podcast called Great News with Kevin and Mike Catherwood from Loveline fame. So anyway,
is Loveline still on?
No, that was
that was K-Rock. That was when I was on KGF. That was in the 80s.
No, Loveline was still on into the 2000s because I remember
really?
listening to it in high school, and that was terrific. It was Mike Catherwood and Dr. Drew Pinsky.
Yes, well, Dr. Drew has become a major guy.
He has
all over the country. I remember Dr. Drew from that.
So anyway, I mean, long story short, I'm Barry's IT guy. We've worked together for years, and we wanted to start a podcast. So I'm here to be the foil to your hero.
Well, I don't know if I'm the hero, but I mean, I'm starting out in the very beginning. We're talking the 60s now, and the progression of the radio stations that I worked at all over America. I've worked at so many stations. A couple of them were Exxon and Shell. No, I've done a lot of radio stations all over the country. And then...
the reason I chirped up originally was when you were telling that story about your mom doing the eggshell and kind of looking at them under light and seeing...
Handler.
Yeah, the egg handler. It reminds me a little bit of that I Love Lucy sketch where she's kind of bagging things on the assembly line, the candies.
Oh, yeah. And then she has to keep eating them
exactly.
because she can't put them in boxes.
A little bit.
Right.
I mean, I look young, but I'm an old soul, so...
No, well, I am an old soul. I'm like I said, I'm older than dirt. So from that, I got on, and then in the summertime, I was on 6 to 8:30 when the sun went down. And we would play the national anthem, and we would say who owned the station, and then I'd turn the switch, and it would go off.
That's interesting that they played the national anthem every time before you went off. Was it just the national anthem or anything like God Bless America?
No, it was the national anthem, and they played it signing on and signing off. This is in the 60s. And Don's father was Everett Dillard, who also owned WASH FM, which is still a big FM station. And WASH was like in the back where the bathroom was. And if you flushed the toilet and the guy was on the air at WASH, You could hear it. It was real Mickey Mouse. And he also owned Channel 5. He owned WTTG, which he later sold to Dumont, who sold it to Metro Media, who now it's Fox. So he didn't think television would last. I don't know where the hell he was. And he hated Little Richard's records. I mean, Everett would run into the station if I'm playing it or Don's playing it, or they had a couple other guys. Stan the Man Karras was there and Earl Robin. They were DJs there. He would take the records and break them. So Don would have to hide the Little Richard records. He had well, I don't want to tell you what he called him, but I mean, he hated Little Richard. He hated the way Little Richard looked, and there was a big backlash. But we still played Little Richard at WDON.
Oh, clearly he was behind the times.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I mean, this guy smoked a pipe, and I can't. I mean, he was an old man. I'm not dogging Everett. I mean, his wife was like the GM of the station, Jean Dillard, and his sister, who I can't think of her name at the moment. You know, I'm getting old. I think it was
You'll come up with it.
Jackie. She sold time. It was like a family operation, but because he wanted to be a professional baseball player, but he hurt his knees. He almost worked. He almost played ball for the Senators. That's a baseball team that's gone. They used to play at Griffith Stadium, which is where Howard University is now. That ballpark is gone. That's Don. So he did the radio. I guess he did the radio because they wanted him to do the radio and they named it after him. But he was very flippant. There wasn't really a format on that station, and he could say or do whatever he wanted to do because he really owned the station, except for playing too many black Little Richard type records. There was an aversion to that from his father. Nobody else. But
it seemed like the kids and everybody who was really listening to the station loved it.
Oh,
couldn't get enough.
Of course. You couldn't hear Little Richard. The other pop stations weren't playing Little Richard's version. They were playing Pat Boone or Gail Storm, who covered Little Richard. And from there, I also got on the Milk Grant show, which was a dance show like a Dick Clark show in D.C., and I danced on the show. I wasn't a regular, but I could get in pretty much whenever I wanted. But that's another part of it, which...
Yeah. And for those of you unacquainted with Barry's website, Reazar.com, there's a plethora of photos and videos of all of these shows, of all the Milk Grant show, the shows that you produced throughout the eras, kind of at different stations around the country. So there's plenty of media to accompany all of this, and we'll include some of that in the video version of this. For those of you who are listening to the audio only, just be aware that we'll put this up on Reazar.com. It'll be available on YouTube too, so that you can take a look at what we're talking about.
Right, and from there, I was on WDON, but before I got the shift from 6 to sign off, he came up with a show on Saturday afternoon called Spotlight on Teens, and you would read the results of high school football games. I was on it. There was a girl whose name escapes me, and there was another guy named Kenny Davenport. Excuse me. Kenny Davenport did Montgomery County. I did D.C. because I went to school in D.C. And we would play like the number one record at Coolidge High School or the number one record at Montgomery Blair. And we would talk. And that was an hour show on Saturdays. And then from there, I took the dedications on Saturday, and then I would go with him. I didn't drive. I didn't have a car then, to the record hop. And I'd spin it while he introed it. And it was a weird situation because Link Wray had this record called Rumble. And when Link Wray played, he played a lot of the Don record hops. I became very tight with Link. For a hot minute, I was his roadie. I ran around the country with Link Wray. And the Rayman was his family. His brother was Ray Vernon, who played piano in the Rayman. and he also had a hit record called Evil Angel. Doug Wray was his brother, was on the drums, and his cousin was Shorty on the bass. But he had Rumble, he had Rawhide, he had Jack the Ripper. Most of his stuff was instrumental. And he was the first guy to create that kind of wah-wah sound, real raunchy. And I'm sure people saw Pulp Fiction, they used most of his music as background. And what was funny on his records, which I found out later, Milk Grant got him the deal with Archie Blyer. Archie Blyer used to own Cadence, and he was married to the lead singer of the Chordettes, the girl that sang Lollipop, a Lollipop.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And Milt got his name on, he had a pen name, M. Cooper, was the writer with Link Wray on the records. I didn't realize that till later. I became very friendly with Milt. That comes later on. So I'm doing this, and then in like 1964, now there are 24-hour-a-day stations that are top 40. They're not doing what Don did. One other, I guess, sidebar on the Dillard thing. He had a table in back of him with about 3,045s, nothing filed, and there was no format. He's back there shuffling while the other records were on. He did a lot of live spots, and his thing was he was D.D. Dill Donnard. He called himself all kinds of whack stuff. But if you lived in Washington D.C. and you could get that station, he was on from 56 to 64 till his father flipped it to country, and then Don stayed there to play country. And I said, hell no. I don't know anything about shit-kicking music, but it's not shit-kicking today. It's become country and Western. Back then, it was about my dog got killed, he ran away with my wife, or whatever. I wasn't familiar with that music. So
I mean, for a moment there, I thought you said my dog ran away with the wife.
No, well, I don't know. I mean, there's some kinky stuff going on back then. So I don't know. So from there, and meanwhile, I got out of school, and then I went to WAMU, which is the American University radio station, which is a monster station today. They're 1 or 2 in the book. They're the 1 or 2 rated radio station. It was the first PBS FM station in America. And I had to take a big, I'm not a grammarian, but I had to take a big English course. I just wanted to go there to play radio, to be on the air. And of course, that was kind of weird too, because you could only hear the AM in the dorms. It was carrier current. Or maybe 3 to 6 blocks around American University on Nebraska Avenue. Other than that, it didn't go nowhere. So I don't know. So I used to be on the weekends, and in the afternoon, you could play whatever you wanted to play. You could do pretty much whatever you wanted to do. I'm sitting there, and it's a Saturday, it's a holiday, and there's nobody calling from the dorms, or there's nobody listening. I'm probably talking to myself. So then I realized that the FM had the Texaco Opera Hour on. So what I did, and of course they threw me out of the school after that, I unplugged the Texaco Opera Hour, which came from the Metropolitan Opera in New York, and I plugged in the AM. You heard me screaming and yelling with James Brown, Night Train, or whatever, and I went all over the city.
Well done.
Right, and then immediately the phones blew up, and everybody was, Monday I left the building, after they figured out what I did. And then George Geezy, who was also very instrumental, he was the professor. He was my teacher. He fired me. He threw me out of the building. But on the DL, which was really funny, he was Johnny Carlton on WPGC, which was a top 40 station, also an AM daytimer. So, but I got a lot of adverse publicity, but I figured any kind of publicity is...
Yeah, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Right. So, I mean, after that, I didn't go to school anymore. And then I went with 2 of my buddies, Mike Weber and Fred Sigmund, who's passed, rest in peace. We went to Atlantic City for the summer. They got jobs as waiters in Shumsky's restaurant, which is a Jewish restaurant. on Pacific Avenue, right across from the 500 Club, which was some mobbed up club that had Frank Sinatra and Don Rickles. And I mean, it was like a Vegas joint in Atlantic City, down from Constitution Hall. And I went to WMID and I bullshitted them about how great I was and what kind of great numbers I had. I got a job at WMID in Atlantic City. And of course, that's a weird station too. I mean, we were the station that reaches the beaches. We were 1340 AM, and of course, everybody on the beach is listening to the radio station. And I swear to you, this actually was the deal there. In the summertime, you played 2 records an hour. Everything else was commercials. Coppertone, clubs, Coca-Cola, whatever. In the wintertime, you play 2 commercials an hour and straight music. In the wintertime, you're talking to the fish. Mm-hmm. There's nobody there. So, and then I did a remote from Bay Shores, which was in Summers Point. Now, in Ocean City, New Jersey, it was dry. You couldn't drink. So everybody would go to Summers Point. Summers Point had about 5 or 6 clubs. And there was an under 21 club there that High Lit had from WIBG in Philly. And then Jerry Blavitt, who was the Geeter with the heater. I got very tight with the Geeter, and he stole the club from High Lit. But what the Geeter would do, and the Geeter's still doing this, the Geeter's in his 80s. He owns a club in Margate, New Jersey called Memories. And he hosts these boat cruises with oldie acts. Jerry also owned an oldie label, Lost Night Records. That's another thing. But when I was in Atlantic City, the program director was Heavy Humble Harvey Miller. He taught me how to roll the R's.
Well, can you give us one of those R's?
Well, right now I'm very dry, but no, I can't. Since all of me rolling the R's about 25 years ago, I had throat cancer. And from that, I don't have all my saliva and I don't have all my taste. So wait a minute, maybe I can get some...
I mean, I'll fill in a little bit of airtime while you're giving yourself a little bit of...
some water.
Some tea. So, I mean, it's actually fascinating just how much you recall about all of these tiny details, like the name of the drummer, the name of the bass player from all of these tiny stations. God knows I can't remember anything
that was from Link Wray, because Link Wray was like the first rock star that I kind of got tight with. Over the years, I'm tight with Alice Cooper, with Rod Stewart, with Bob Seger. I helped those guys get their careers going, and like with the Gap Band and. So, but back then, I'm 17 years old or 15 when I first met Don. I mean, I didn't drive. I didn't have a car. And I would go with Link Wray had like a Studebaker, I guess you would call it a Studebaker stretch limo today. I mean, I don't even remember. We would all get into that.
I sincerely hope I can find a picture of that and then post it on the podcast.
Right. And he played places in New Jersey and around. He also played a lot of bars in D.C. He had there was a lot of fights at his appearances. He drew a lot of bikers and a lot of guys who were on White Crosses and Black Beauties, which is speed, because of the music that he played, which kind of incited you to fight. This was before drugs.
Before metal.
Yes, right. Nobody's smoking dope back then. So when you would get high on speed pills and liquor, you want to kick some ass.
It sounds explosive.
Yes, it was. So, and then when marijuana came in the late '60s, that chilled everybody out.
Yeah.
Once you're high, you don't want to fight.
Nice little balancing act there.
Yeah. So Link was my first. I don't know. He had a recording studio in Accokeek, Maryland, called the Accokeek Shack or something. they had a guy named Bunker Hill who sounded kind of like Little Richard. He had a record called Hide and Seek, and they had Bobby the Kid Howard. They had their own label called Florentine Records, and if the record got big in D.C. and Baltimore, Cadence or Epic. They were on Cadence in the beginning, then they went to Epic. And now Link Wray needs to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which he's not. I kind of led a crusade to get him in. He's not even nominated this year. But
Who is nominated this year?
The reformed Fleetwood Mac. That's a good question.
We can look it up.
Right.
Later.
The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to me is bullshit. Because there's so many people that aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I think they've even got disco acts in there. There's nothing wrong with disco music. I played disco. I worked at disco radio stations and had disco TV shows. But rock and roll to me is Link Wray, is Elvis Presley, Little Richard. It's not Donna Summer. Donna Summer's in there. I mean...
yeah, it's not quite... Donna Summer's not really rock. It's hard to...
No, she's disco.
Yeah.
Right, no, I know... Well, I knew her when she was...
By the way, I found who's nominated for the 2021. Mary J. Blige.
Okay, well, she's R&B.
Yeah.
She's not rock and roll.
Exactly.
But there's nothing wrong with Mary J. I know Mary J. too.
It's just not the appropriate category.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's Kate Bush, Devo. That deserves to be there. Foo
Right.
Fighters.
Yeah, the Foo Fighters
Absolutely.
for sure.
The Go-Go's, Iron Maiden.
Yes.
Jay-Z. Nope,
No,
not for rock.
I did the first Hard Knock Life rap tour. I'm tight with Sean Carter and with Beyonce. Beyonce's mother works out with my wife. They do Pilates and stuff together, and they go to a gym. But, I mean, Jay is hip-hop.
Yeah.
I mean, you say hip-hop, boom, Jay-Z.
Exactly.
It's not rock and roll.
No, and there's also Shaka Khan.
Well, I mean, she had the best lips of any chick at one time. Chaka Khan.
Oh, yeah.
No, she used to be gorgeous. She still looks good.
Then the next one, I'm surprised this has never come up before. Carole King.
Well, she should have been in it years ago.
Yeah, decades ago.
I mean, that Tapestry record's still selling.
Fella Cutie. I don't know who
I
that
don't
is.
know.
I have no idea who that is.
I'm in the music business, and I've never done anything else except be on radio, TV, or in the music business. I don't know who that act is.
Yeah, then there's LL Cool J again.
Well,
same.
no, LL lives down the street. LL's great, but he's a movie star now. He's not. He hasn't had a record out in 10 years.
Well, also his records were never rock. His records.
No, we're all hip hop.
Exactly.
No, I know. I'm going back to. I definitely LL.
Then there's New York Dolls.
Yeah, that's Buster Poindexter. I don't know if you know. He was the lead from the Dolls, and he had a solo record that was really good called "Hot, Hot, Hot." But the New York Dolls should definitely be in there.
Rage Against the Machine, absolutely.
For sure.
Todd Rundgren.
Yes, he was Runt.
Tina Turner.
Yes.
Rock?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Proud Mary, she started out...
That's true.
She started out R&B. I mean, I like Fool in Love. I like all the old stuff. And she did a lot of stuff for me. There's a great documentary coming out on Tina on the 28th of March on HBO Max.
Did they pay you to plug this?
No. Commercial consideration. No. I like Tina. Tina never got the real what she should. I mean, she did stuff with Mick, and I mean, and I knew Ike too. I mean, she did Ike's cocaine. He would beat her up. I mean, I don't know if you saw that movie.
I didn't.
That movie was her life. I'm sure it's going to be in this documentary. He kind of like abused her, but he made her a star. And Ike Turner, I don't know if anybody knows this, if you go back to 1951, there was a record called Rocket 88 about an Oldsmobile, about an 88 car. They consider that to be the first rock and roll record. That was Ike Turner.
Really?
Yeah, before he found Tina.
Yeah.
And the Ikeettes. No, they were a killer band if you ever saw them live when they were straight or when they were high. I don't know what the hell when I saw them. I saw them. This was ridiculous. Speaking of that, Don Dillard ran them at the Queenstown Bowling Alley in Queenstown, Maryland, in Prince George's County. I just thought of that when you mentioned Ike and Tina. But
and then there's just one more name on the list, Dionne Warwick.
she's an R&B ballad woman, and she's also the psychic's. If you ever watch that, where you call this phone number and the psychic will give you your reading. She did
Cleo.
she did those commercials. No, I mean, and Dionne Warwick has been around forever. She is she's Whitney Houston's aunt.
Oh.
She shouldn't be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She should be in the R&B Hall of Fame.
Unfortunately, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame seems to have just become a catch-all for everything. It really, if it wants to maintain its purity, it should stick to the rock acts.
Right. Well, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is fazunky or is I don't know. I don't want to diss it too much. Also, it's in Cleveland, and Cleveland is where Alan Freed started. Alan Freed was the first white disc jockey to play black music. And he came up with the word rock and roll. But rock and roll, back when the R&B people were singing it in the early 50s, meant sex, meant screwing. So he took it. And
things you've never learned before, but are happy to know now.
Yes. Well, I don't know about that. I mean,
why not?
Right. But, I mean, without Alan Freed, he was the king of rock and roll DJs. He was the first guy. He made those movies. I don't know if you know Rock Around the Clock, Rock, 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 Don't Knock the Rock. They were like music videos. He was very tight with Bill Haley in the comment. Who cares who he was tight with? But in Cleveland is where he started. And he was sponsored by some record store. He would come on at 10 o'clock at night, go till 2 a.m. And he had the first integrated record hop, I guess, or rock show. No one had done concerts before. And, of course, they had a riot there because it was black and white and they were all segregated, you know. It was a lot of BS. But from that, he went to New York and owned New York City at WINS and WABC. But the thing in Cleveland, that's why the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there, because of Alan Freed. That's bullshit, too. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame needs to be in New York or L.A. That's where rock and roll is. All the record companies started in New York at the Brill Building, and all the major labels are there now. Some of them have satellite offices here, but everything is still in New York.
So it's just a handout for Cleveland, saying, well, I mean, what really is there to do in Cleveland besides visit the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Right.
Let's give you one major tourist attraction.
That's it. Well, I mean, they call Cleveland the mistake by the lake.
Did not know that one. And if anybody's listening in from Cleveland, please hit us up if you have any kind of...
Bruce Reiner, don't beat me up. That's where he comes from.
Yeah, so that's the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But anyway, how did we get on that tangent?
I don't know. Because Link Wray was nominated.
Oh, yeah.
He's been never nominated. I mean, also Dwayne Eddy needs to be in there. I don't know if you know who Dwayne Eddy was. Another instrumentalist. They used to have instrumentals that were hits back then. That's not happening today. Today, music is basically hip hop, not hip hop, and a lot of divas, and that's pop music today. Back to WMID, the station that reaches the beaches in Atlantic City. We had these Coppertone ads that we would play every 15 minutes. Ding, it's turn so you don't burn, and we would have guys on the beach giving away WMID bumper stickers with Coppertone back then. From that, after I went through a winter there, when I'm talking to the fish, it was ridiculous. I went to, I got a job in Annapolis, Maryland, at WYRE. That was the Chesapeake Bay station. And they had, it was owned by a couple of Jewish guys here whose names...
Well, I mean, I also want to save plenty of material for follow-up episodes. So
well, that's nothing. I mean, I've worked at... all right, here we go. I worked in Annapolis, in Baltimore, in Philly, in Los Angeles, in Washington, D.C., in Myrtle Beach, in Fresno, California, Pensacola, Florida, Columbia, South Carolina. No. Well, I got...
we got stories for days.
Right, and then I got the TV stuff. So, no, how much have we done so far?
We've done at least a half hour here.
All right, so maybe we'll stop. And if you people want to hear more of this BS, Well, and it's basically my life. I have a book coming out, and I'm trying to work a deal with Netflix because I had one last thing here. In the early '70s, I'm back in D.C. and I'm doing progressive rock on WHMC. We were the first progressive rock station. We were the 500-watt flower pot. We had 500 watts. And this is AM. But throughout the period, I became very friendly with Milt Grant, who was like the king of the TV shows, dance shows. Every city had a dance guy like Dick Clark.
I mean, yeah, it was. Wait, were he and Dick contemporaries? Like, so was Milt?
No, Milt was
pre-American Bandstand.
No. Bandstand. A quick little thing about Bandstand, which Blavitt told me about. Blavitt ran the committee. Bandstand started in 1953 with a guy named Bob Horn.
Mm-hmm.
Bob Horn got busted. Okay, so Dick Clark was a booth announcer at the time. He would go WFIL, Channel 6, Philadelphia. His father owned a radio station in Schenectady, New York. He got him in Philly. So Dick Clark looked good, sounded good. He replaced him. He started in 56. Now, the network picked him up, I think, in 57. He used to be on in Philly from 2:30 to 5:30 every day. And then when the network picked him up, he was on from 3 to 5:30. If Dick Clark played your record for 2 weeks straight, you had a hit all over the country. Just once a day, everybody ran home. There was this girl, Justine Corelli. I used to go home just to see her. Hellwood going to see Don Dillard. I got to see Justine dance. So Milt started out in 56. What he did, he bought the time from Channel 5. He was on once a week.
Okay.
Record hop. Then he became 7 days a week. But from that, he got a couple of Jewish dentists, and they got the first UHF TV station in D.C., WDCA, Channel 20. From that, Milt had a network. He had about 15 TV stations all over America. Became extremely wealthy, not from playing records or dancing, having people dance on his show. So somehow we bonded. I don't know. I had a lot of TV shows on Channel 20. I also was on Channel 5, WTTG, which was Metro Media, and I worked for the Washington Post TV station, Channel 9. It was owned by Katharine Graham. Now it's owned by...
the Post itself?
Yeah. The
Bezos, no?
No, it's... Yeah, Bezos.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he owns it now. But through that, Milt let me do a show that came on Saturday nights at 11 o'clock. And it was open-ended, meaning when I got through, they played the national anthem. I could go till 2:30. I could go till 4 o'clock in the morning. I had to be off by 5. That's when the God Squad came on.
Right, on Sunday morning.
Yeah, right. He sold the time. So he would during the week, I would tape the acts. Mm-hmm. Nobody was live, and I had comedians. I had Richard Pryor, Cheech and Chong. I had anybody that was playing in Washington, D.C. Professor Irwin Corey, I don't know if you know who he is. He's supposedly, he talks double talk. He's dead too. He worked the Blue Mirror, which was a strip joint. He used to come in. I had Willard Scott on. Do you know who Willard is?
I don't know Willard.
Willard was the weatherman on the Today Show. He was the local weatherman in D.C. on Channel 4. Well, I'm getting way off all this.
Well, so now we're starting to get into your kind of TV career here. So that TV career, I want to explore more in another episode.
Right, but the one thing about the TV thing, I was the first guy to have progressive rock on TV. They played live. I wouldn't let anybody lip sync, and we could get
no Ashley Simpson SNL type stuff going on.
No, you mean Milli Vanilli?
Oh, I mean, my contemporary was the Ashley Simpson SNL fiasco, but
right. Well, but everybody sings over themselves now on television, basically.
That's true.
But back then, you had the lip sync, but we weren't a union station. So I have a lot of that video, and I will tell you how I got that video at another episode. And if you like this, let us know. I'll continue.
Please subscribe. Please like. I mean, all of that fun social media stuff. Share it with your friends. If you like it, if you found it interesting, just share it widely.
Right, and as I got better on the radio, because, I don't know how I got on. I had marbles in my mouth, and I'm trying to sound like this. It was a different world then. And the one thing I can say, they have no real personalities today. If you've heard me on the radio, you either love me or hate me. You don't just listen to me. I'm not nondescript. That's what people want. In fact, when I worked at Weem and they fired me in D.C., I went to Winks. The guy kept my name, and I had to be the real BR on Winks. And eventually I sued him. And we'll get into all that at another time. But if you like this, let us know. And if I don't hear from anybody, you have the only shot that I did. But I had fun BSing talking about this, and I hope you liked it. And we have video. What I was telling you, I'm working on a book that will come out soon, no later than 2022. And also, I'm trying to do a Netflix rockumentary because I had all these people play live before Midnight Special, which was Bert Sugarman, and before Don Kirshner. Those guys had live rock acts, but they were a year or two after me. So if you liked it, BR is going to say au revoir. You rock on because you only rock once. Buy anything that you can with money, honeysuckle. Look a poo, I'm all through. And remember, you may be the flower, but I am the root. I still can't roll the R's. And I'll see you in the streets. Bicycle.